Hi, this is John Pettigrew, and you're listening to Talking Through My Hat, a podcast that explores bookish businesses, the fantastic people who create them, and what those people have learned. I'm a hat wearer, a recovering editor, and the creator of Future Proofs, enabling editors and authors to work better online. To find out more, visit wearefutureproofs.com or follow me on Twitter at John_Pettigrew. Welcome to this week's Talking Through My Hat. Today I'm talking with Michael Kowalski, the founder of Storienteer, an augmented reality gaming app, and also Programme Director of the Confluence conference this February. Before all that, he's worked as a developer at The Guardian, was head of publishing for a digital initiative at News International, as well as founding two other businesses, Kitsite and Contentment. So welcome to the podcast, Michael.
Hi.
So you're the first person I've talked to on this podcast who's working with augmented reality. So how do you describe Storienteer to someone who doesn't know anything about your business, or indeed probably AR in general?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. I mean, AR or augmented reality, mixed reality, the terminology is still in flux on this. A lot of us like saying mixed reality, which is really just a way of saying it's not just camera overlays. That that we're talking about virtual content that seamlessly interleaves with the surrounding world. And that's a way of differentiating from things like Pokemon Go, which, uses overlays in a pretty basic way. People often talk about it as an augmented reality game, and, location-based game would be more accurate. So Storienteer, I think of Storienteer as a kind of vehicle for exploring augmented and mixed reality content. And I say a vehicle because it's not really clear what the final form will be. There's plenty
very
of
agile.
Well, there are plenty of AR startups out there talking up the immersive sector, and therefore talking up the valuations. And fair enough, you have to kind of generate enthusiasm to make things happen. But the reality is AR is still at quite an early stage. I was watching a live stream of the last Apple keynote, and one commentator said, "Here's the bit where Apple pretend people actually use AR." And, fair enough, actually, fair point. The fact is the hardware doesn't really exist yet. The mobile AR stuff, the stuff that Apple are doing, is a hack. It's kind of quite remarkable hack, actually. I still can scarcely believe that it works. And almost the more you know about how it's done, the less credible it seems. But at the same time, who wants to actually walk around holding their phone up in front of their face? It's really very practical. And if you look at all the existing headsets, things like HoloLens or Magic Leap, they're not really for consumers yet at all.
Yeah.
Have you tried any of these things, John?
I have. Occasionally you go to a conference and they have, look at our shiny toys, and you, as you say, you wear it. It's like wearing a massive thing on the front of your head, and they cost about £1,500, £2,000. I say they're not. You're not going to pick them up on the high street yet.
Absolutely not.
Except of course the Google's one that's just a piece of carpet that's stuck to your face with your phone inside it.
yeah. And they're pretty fiddly and buggy and so on as well. And then there's not much content either. So consumers aren't really going to pick this up until there are affordable, lightweight glasses and probably eventually contact lenses and maybe even eventually artificial eyes. That's what I'm holding out for.
Do you think we're going to get back to Google Glass and then leap past that to smaller and smaller form factors?
Google Glass was kind of an interesting case, wasn't it, about how you can muddy your own waters if you go about these things in the wrong way. Although I'm a bit reminded, you remember when mobile phones came out, these massive bricks that only yuppies carried, and we all despised them, and we never thought we would own these damn things.
There were comedians whose entire routine was walking around with giant mobile phones being annoying.
Exactly, and Google possibly tried to jump too quickly on this, and there's something also a bit, Google or Facebook, the people we really want doing this stuff as well. Companies whose entire business model is predicated on gathering as much data about us as they can. So anyway, so I think Apple are the one we're all waiting for. We know they've hired. We know they've filed patents. Rumor says there's something coming. Tim Cook talks up AR all the time.
Yeah. And so you're with Storienteer, you're kind of sitting there waiting for the consumer thing to be just over the horizon, so you can then go, great, and we've done some experiments, and now we know what's going to work, and there we go, bah.
Well, so the thing about this space is with Storienteer, what I'm not trying to do is tackle any of the really hard, close to the metal bits of technology.
Yeah.
Like computing point clouds or relocalization, or like there are a lot of super hard technical challenges in this. And frankly, there are way better engineers with bigger budgets cracking on with it. I can't compete with Apple on that stuff. But the other half of the equation, even once we get the hardware, is content. Where's the content going to come from?
Why would I want to buy one of these just because it's shiny isn't enough?
Yeah, absolutely. There has to be some content there. So that's the bit that also I've got more experience on, and that's the bits that seems interesting to focus on now.
So why did you kind of go that way? Because your previous work and your previous business have been very much digital, but more sort of content and interactivity and stuff. And you've taken this kind of turn. So why did you set up Storienteer?
Well, in a way, it is a kind of evolution of what I've done in the past. I mean, I've always been interested in the meta problems, not so much in making things as making the thing that makes the things.
Yeah.
My first startup, Kitsite, was a very early stage web-hosted content management system. It was about making websites. I followed that with Contentment, which was about the iPad had just come out. It was about making content for tablets and mobile.
Yeah.
And so, here's this interesting new space. It needs content. So there is a progression there that makes sense. But also, of all the tech I've played with, I think mixed reality is the most extraordinary. I really think it will change the way that we live, and more profoundly even than mobile. It's not just a technology, it's a medium, and it's not a medium that we consume, it's a medium that we will live inside. I think there's just tremendous potential about this, about making the world a more magical place to live. Looking up for our phones, throwing our phones away even, and looking at the world around us that's full of marvel.
It is the thing, as you said, that 10, 15 years ago, if you look at how we looked at mobile phones, how we used mobile phones, compared to now, it's just a completely different thing. It's not, the phone then was something you talked to people on. Now you're there, you've got games, you've got your internet, you've got all your friends are in there, all this kind of stuff. And AR, again, you can't tell. You couldn't have told 15 years ago what it would be like now, and we can't really tell what AR is going to be like. We've got some ideas.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. I think we don't really understand the grammar of it at all. I mean, a friend of mine keeps saying we're still at the talking dog stage, and I think that's true. It's remarkable that the dog can talk. What a shame the dog doesn't have anything interesting to say. And after a little while, we've seen the talking dog, and we want something else to happen. So I think it is a really interesting space, and it needs creative people to be able to explore what the possibilities are around it. And that's turned out to be a big part of what I'm trying to do at Storienteer, because I think when I set the business up, we thought gaming was the way into this, actually. Okay. And then what we discovered was that there was this whole complicated asset pipeline that you needed in order to be able to create AR content. There's this chain of tools like your 3D modeling, rigging and animation, audio, game engines, Xcode, like a whole bunch of like super complex point solutions. They're all awful, by the way. I mean, the 3D modeling software has to be seen to be believed. It's the most extraordinary thing that has its own bizarre interface paradigms and so on. So just as much for our own sanity as anything, we thought, okay, actually you have to look at a bit more upstream, look at that tool chain, and is there a way we can simplify that tool chain and make it something that you can approach as a creative person? Because it seems to me this is a massive barrier to entry for actually discovering what AR can do. That the only way you can experiment is get a big room full of developers and highly specialized people who are each doing their part in this tool chain. So we have to democratize that, I think, really.
Okay.
And what's interesting about that is potentially we can do that in advance of having the hardware. We could, if we can,
Yeah.
at least that's what I'm exploring at the moment. Can we do a bit of prototyping, which is a bit imaginary, really, imaginary prototyping?
I love that phrase you used just a moment ago, kind of putting the grammar of AR in place. Because as you say, until you can do it, you don't know what the pieces are and how they can fit together and what makes a meaningful sentence and this kind of stuff. I think that's quite an interesting way of looking at it, and that's kind of the kind of things you're trying to put together now.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think it's like the early days of film as well, when it was all very literal to start with. It was people were filming radio plays essentially, or theatre plays,
filming people on a theatre stage. Yeah.
It took a while before like really fundamental things like flashbacks or jump cuts,
moving
or,
cameras,
all these
and
kinds of techniques evolved over time. And I think, and I'm not going to invent that grammar. What I want to do is try and put in place a toolkit that other people can use to discover ways of approaching these sorts of experiences that none of us have thought of yet.
You do seem to make a habit of working in spaces just as they start to go somewhere. So it must be really hard to know where your business is going to go. Now, what path it's going to take. If you're doing an iPad business just as the iPad launches and this kind of stuff, and an AR business before AR really gets out there, presumably, I mean, how do you handle that? How do you handle setting a direction and knowing whether you're going the right way?
Well, good question, John. Yes, just as well I'm not risk averse. Yeah, so that last business, Contentment, is a good case in point. When I started that, the iPad had just come out, and it really felt like it could be a game changer for certain types of content that hadn't really been able to transition to mobile up to that point.
Yeah.
Fairly early on, we took some investment from a magazine publisher, which really pushed it in that direction. So here we've got these lovely high-resolution screens that you could do nice, beautiful layouts on it, not just sort of flowed text content like the Kindle. It felt like there was now a route for this type of content to make the transition to digital. And it turned out punters weren't interested.
What can you do?
I wasn't the only one who made that bet, and we were all essentially wrong. I
remember when I was at CUP, we did some really great Shakespeare apps that were wonderful, and no one bought them. And I mean, I think for me, the writing there on the wall was when even TouchPress pivoted away from high quality iPad apps. And it's well, if they aren't making any money doing this.
Yeah, that's true. So there's a lot of risk about getting into these early things, but it's where it's where the shiniest toys are, the most interesting things to play with, and that does.
And without playing with the things, you don't discover what does work.
Yes,
what things are good for. Inevitably, a lot of experiments don't pan out.
And that's the stuff that rocks my boat. I mean, there's more than one reason to start a business, but for me, it is about exploring some new things.
Yeah.
So I don't know where Storienteer is going to go, and I'm quite open about that at the moment. That it's such an early stage market. I think if we bring together a lovely little toolkit for making mixed reality experiences or prototyping them, it's not clear that there's a monetizable market on that, or that the people who use it will actually be able to make anything that anybody will look at and they'll make money out of. But it doesn't mean the work doesn't have value. I mean, I hope there is a monetizable market.
But if you don't do it, then no one gets to do the prototyping and no one gets to do the creative side. I think that's what's really interesting about making tools.
Yes.
Because in and of themselves, tools are a bit boring, but what you can do with them can be fascinating. You can take a kind of vicarious pleasure in what someone else has done with something you've made.
Yes. I mean, it does mean that they're quite hard businesses because the people you're selling to are not the end consumer in a way. So to really work, the people that are using your toolkit have to have a market of their own. They have to have somebody that they're doing it for. So there's a kind of two-stage market there, which does make it a bit harder.
So, I mean, when you're thinking about where the business is going to go, and this is a great idea, I want to play with this, but is there a business here, or is it just something I'm going to do in my spare time? How do you go about learning to put a business together, how to run a business better? You've done it a few times now. I mean, how do you learn that?
Well, I've probably done that very badly, to be honest, John. I find business books almost uniformly unreadable. A friend of mine who wrote one had the honesty to say in his preface, look, here's the argument. The rest of the book is padding because you can't sell 2 pages of A4. I thought, okay, yeah, fair. So, I've mostly worked it out as I've gone along. I think I've got a pretty good idea how to do most of it now. But I do wish, looking back, that I'd found myself a decent mentor or two in the early days. I think that would have been a smart move.
I mean, is that the kind of thing that's really paid off later? Finding people to talk to for you?
Well, it's interesting. There are a lot of difficult things about doing a startup, John. You're aware of this.
one or two, yeah.
You always feel obliged to present a positive face to everyone, to your co-workers, peers, your investors, the world. And let's face it, we all have some long, dark nights where we doubt what we're doing and we're not sure of the way forward. And then we have to spring up in the morning and pretend that it's all good. And that can be kind of very lonely and maybe not very healthy. And there's probably a better way of doing it. I'm not sure we do enough to support each other, actually, because I know when I meet other startup founders, I know that we all go, yeah, we're doing fine, it's all great, but we all know that we have those types of problems as well. And
was it a few years ago, Richard Nash ran a few sessions as a kind of a closed entrepreneurs sort of therapy group, almost. He did one at Frankfurt and this kind of thing, where it was just a case, come and talk and share the pain.
That's a good idea.
It was a really interesting experience, because it's hard to be honest. It's hard not to be honest with yourself about what's going on, and then to be honest with other people. You need to be honest with the people you're working with, but you don't necessarily need to be candid.
I
emotionally
understand
honest.
the distinction you're trying to make there, John. I agree with it. Yes, it's a balancing act. So it can be a difficult thing.
Yeah, taking that thing, you're working in a business where, to some extent, it's a suck it and see. We're going to play with some stuff and see where it goes. I mean, do you tend to try? Do you have a goal where you think, a year from now or 5 years from now or whatever, that's the kind of thing we want to be seeing, and we're kind of tacking towards that? Are you a planner, a strategist, or do you just kind of wing it?
Sure, I think it's really important to have a bit of a roadmap. It's funny, John. I will say that when I look at other people's businesses, I can be quite forensic about them. I find it much easier to see about the things that they've forgotten to do or that they're neglecting or so on. For instance, I think a lot of startups I see don't think seriously enough about their exit at the outset.
Yeah.
And that's kind of perfectly natural, because you're excited about doing this new thing. Why would you be thinking about how it ends,
Yes.
But that's absolutely a discipline that you should have. You should be thinking, okay, am I doing this as a lifestyle business, which there's nothing wrong with. I think lifestyle businesses are great businesses. Or if you're thinking about exiting, what might that look like? Because the opportunities to exit don't come up that often. So I think it's something you have to work towards and have to think about how you're going to do.
Yeah, you don't always have people just rocking up going, here's a big pile of cash, I want your business. It doesn't happen like that very often.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing with Storienteer is, but I've realized it is going to be a slightly longer game than I thought, because the market, for the reasons we've talked about, the market is going to take a bit longer to develop. We need the hardware to become consumer hardware and so on. And it's just at an earlier stage of development than really any other market that I've looked at. So I wouldn't say winging it. I have a kind of roadmap for the next year. But if you're following this space, there's some new announcement every other month or every other week even, So
you can't plot in detail.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you say you kind of make a habit of setting up difficult businesses, in a sense, that sometimes a business is really clear. I'm going to open a shop. I'm going to be in this area. I'm going to sell this stuff to those people, or I'm going to build this product and I'm going to sell it to those people via this route, whatever. You're very much more exploratory. So what is it that you personally find hardest about running a business? I mean, the kind of businesses you run, I think, would scare a lot of people rigid. Presumably that's not the case because you keep doing it. So what is it that you find hardest?
Probably true. You certainly have to have a bit of an appetite for risk to be willing to approach this sort of business. It's funny, actually, in the rest of my personal life, I have no appetite for risk whatsoever. But in this, for some reason, I find it quite attractive. So things are hard. There's a lot of boring bits about running a business, a lot of kind of machinery that you have to keep oiled. But that's not actually hard. It's just tedious. And once you've practiced it a little bit, you can just do it. I find investor relations can be a bit difficult. Just because, I should say, I've never taken money off investors without thinking, believing quite strongly that they would see a good return on it. That hasn't always worked out, but that's always been my intention. But at the same time, I do find the mindset is very different from mine. That kind of our motivations are different motivations, and that can be difficult. Maybe I've just been unlucky.
Well, that's the thing. The investor fundamentally has a financial incentive, whereas you, as you've already said, you're in it for the playing, for the exploring, for the creating.
Yeah, I think I have a character flaw about money, to be honest. I just find it profoundly uninteresting, really.
I'm not sure I'd describe that as a flaw, personally.
Well, there you go. But, the hard things. Well, in a way, I think the hardest thing about running your own, starting up your own business is about trying not to let the perfect be the enemy of the good enough. It's really easy to think, oh, it's not quite ready. This could be better, etc.
Yeah.
When really you need to kind of get out there as quickly as you can and find out whether you're just wasting your time or, find out what users might actually want. I think you've got to be ready to either give up or change course quickly, and not be too stubborn and get too bedded down in something that's maybe not working.
Yeah.
I can't say I'm perfect at that. I think I'm better at it than I was, but it's still hard. It's hard to drown your kittens.
Well, yeah, and it's a balancing act because sometimes you have to press on to get through a barrier. Other times you have to give up and try something different. And I don't know that you can tell in advance. I think it's a skill, as you say, that you maybe get better at spotting the right time.
Yes. Yeah.
When persistence becomes pig-headedness.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, if you take an investment, it's very hard to go and say, look, hey, this isn't working. It's a difficult conversation. You really want to, everyone who's been involved in the business, all the stakeholders, the co-workers and staff, and you want to make sure that everybody gets a return on the effort that they've put in. So there are forces that are driving you to keep things going past the point where you should. I think that's something you have to try and be cautious about.
Yeah.
It's quite hard.
So what then have you learned about yourself from all this process? From, as you say, you've learned maybe that you're risk tolerant in business, but risk averse elsewhere. I mean, what has running your businesses taught you?
Well, I like doing it. I think I'm actually quite good at it. I've got definite control freak tendencies. I really enjoy working with others. I especially enjoy helping young people, build out their careers. That's very rewarding work. But at the same time, I know I find it very hard to surrender creative control to others. There's a whole bunch of stuff, the kind of infrastructure, the actual code, the kind of process, security, all sorts of things I really don't give a crap about. But the product experience itself, that's something I want to own. I want to own what happens when you use a product and what it feels like.
Okay.
I think for me, I've got to say that, and I'm not proposing this is the one true way, the startup literature is full of one true ways and really annoying. But my ideal work-life balance is one where work and life are pretty close to the same thing. And I really understand this isn't for everyone, but for me, work is the thing you spend most of your waking hours doing. So I want it to be pretty much the most interesting thing I do. So and when I start a business, the thing about that I'm thinking about it at 10 o'clock at night or whatever, that doesn't bother me at all, because I wouldn't be doing it otherwise if it wasn't interesting enough for me to be thinking about it at 10 o'clock at night.
Yeah. So, I mean, what then, you're thinking about it all the time and it's interesting and stuff, but what is it that keeps you coming back, keeps you founding a new business, keeps you hammering away at these problems? What is it that keeps you going day to day, every day?
Well, I think we've already established it's not the money.
There are easier ways of making money.
There are easy ways of making money. If you're interested in creative technology, as I am, what a time to be alive. It's like the world is this toolbox of magical things. You can spend a lot of time just discovering new skills, learning new things, making new types of experience, whatever. You can kind of strike out into these here be dragons corners of the map. It's a fantastic. So there are a lot of distractions, or a lot of things you think, that would be quite a fun thing to look at. Drones, could do drones. Be all right. But certainly for Storienteer, as I say, I can't see a more interesting space turning up for the next. I think it's going to take at least 10 years for it to in any way stabilize. And there's just this wealth of creative opportunity. As I say, we're inventing the language of it. It's so early that I will happily explore it for a long time. I think there's a lot of cool work to be done here.
Brilliant. Well, that's a fantastic note to end. Thanks very much for your time, Michael.
Yeah, not at all, John. Good talking to you.
This was Talking Through My Hat, a podcast by John Pettigrew, founder of We Are Futureproofs. Please let me know your thoughts by leaving a review at Apple Podcasts or by commenting on the website, myhat.wearefutureproofs.com. You can subscribe to this channel at Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Our theme music is from hooksounds.com.